Hi, it's Mike Thornton from Pro Tools Expert, and today I'm joined by Mike Aiton. Mike, welcome.
Hi.
And today we're going to take a look at a question that has a lot of traffic on the DUC, but one of the community members, Paul Maunder, contacted us and said, what should we be doing with regard to dipped stems and undipped stems? So Mike, before we start, could you perhaps explain what we mean by dipped and undipped stems?
Now there's a can of worms. Let's maybe start the discussion maybe even by discussing what is an M&E and what is in terms of a documentary and in terms of a drama.
Yeah, good.
Now, in terms of a drama, it's usually referred to as a DME, which is dialogue, music and effects. So everything bar the on-screen voice. Now, in drama terms, what tends to happen when you have an international sale is that obviously if the dialogue's in English, that's no good for the Germans or no good for the French because they want to post-sync it in their own language. So what the drama dubbing mixer has to do is cut out all the dialogue but leave in any on-screen sound of movement, which is called production effects, so that they can be used. And where they have to chop away the dialogue, where people are speaking, so if you imagine a scene where I'm peeling potatoes but talking, obviously my dialogue needs replacing in French or German, but suddenly the sound has gone of, if you take it away, of my potato peeling.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen is that in a drama, you go to a Foley studio and they will re-record all the on-screen sound effects, the footsteps, the doors, the cloth movements of the clothes, and any spot effects, which would be like my potato peeling. And you have a Foley track. Now, the idea being that if you remove all the dialogue, by then in using the Foley and pushing the Foley more, it replaces the on-screen missing action. So therefore,
all the sounds that came in via the microphone when you were recording the dialogue on location.
Yes, minus the dialogue, obviously. So then that's what's called a fully filled DME. Now that track, or those tracks, can then be sent off to France, Germany, wherever. And then the foreign language versions, you can re-record the actors saying their lines, obviously trying to match up P's, B's and syllables and finding any translation that has the same meaning but similar mouth movements. It's a real skill. Now, that's a drama. Now think documentaries or reality TV or standard television that isn't drama. In the world of documentaries and reality TV, an M&E track is the same as what the film people call a DME. So essentially it is the dialogue, the music and the effects, and it is everything in the production bar the voiceover.
Yeah, the commentary or the voiceover, whatever we choose to call it, yeah.
Yeah, off-camera narration. Because predominantly, if you're selling your program abroad, and this is an issue really I think that a lot of documentary mixers don't quite get, that actually international sales are king. And often a production will make more of its money from its international sales than it will make from its one Channel 4 airing or its one BBC airing. So actually, getting the M&E mix right is the most important thing. Now, I was very fortunate in my television upbringing. After leaving the BBC, I joined a company called Transworld International, which was the UK's largest independent production company, who produce a lot of worldwide programming. All their money is made from worldwide sales. And it was drummed into us, the M&E is king. The M&E mix must be brilliant. Because the mistake a lot of people make is to go straight for the English mix. Now, if you go straight for the English mix with the UK narration on it, the problem you're going to have is that you've got dips going all over your mix for where there's narration. So then when you have
so just to be clear, you're dipping the music or any sound or other sounds under the voiceover, under the narration. So hence the phrase dipped. all those mixes, you're dipping the music under, you're dipping the sound effects under the voiceover. So when you take the voiceover away to replace it with a French voiceover or a German voiceover, that one of the problems we have with foreign language is it's the different duration. The particular piece of narration in a different language is longer or shorter.
Yes, especially German with its compound nouns. They don't call it a lawnmower, they call it a square gadget with a vertically inclined motor for shaving glass on at an angle of 90 degrees. Sorry, I'm being facetious, but that kind of type thing. Spanish in general, way longer than English. English is actually a relatively succinct language. In fact, English, even compared to American English, can tend to be more succinct, just from a style point of view. So the point is, if you go for a UK mix first, what you end up doing, if you're not careful, is producing a dipped M&E, which is useless for every other nation. Because if you have a voiceover in English that lasts for 10 seconds, but in French it's 12, because you cannot condense down the translation anymore, then where your dip in the music and the effects balances for the English voice is not going to be right for the French voice, and you're going to be fighting it. Now, people tie themselves up too much in knots about this, and the important thing I think to remember here is that international reversioning has to be done on a budget, even more of a budget than everything else. So when you send a program off to Italy, you send a program off to France, they do not have time to sit there with separate dialogue, separate music, separate effects, separate voiceover, and remix the whole show.
No, they just want this clean, this well-presented M&E, and the key thing here with a good M&E for documentary is that it doesn't dip where the voiceover will go, which means that the person doing the repurposing has got the choice and the freedom to put the dips in to fit the foreign language narration, which will almost certainly be a different duration to the original, in this case, English.
Correct. Got it in one. So people often tie themselves up in knots by trying to sometimes present too many options. Now, whenever I make a documentary, I've done a lot of reversioning. One of my clients is a large UK broadcaster, and we receive a lot of programming from America. Unfortunately, America doesn't get international versioning for television very well. I'm sorry to say. I'm not being jingoistic here. It's my experience. And I think that stems from sometimes a lack of involvement with foreign language versioning. It's passed off down the chain. It's not my problem. I've made it. I don't, if you make it incorrectly, you give it to the client. They don't know any better. And then once it's sold to, it's the poor sod who's sitting at the other end in France or Italy or Germany or Paraguay or wherever, who sits there and goes, oh, another dipped M&E I'm going to have to fight. Because every time they're dipping for the English, I'm having to push up to compensate. And of course, you can never quite gather when that's happening unless you study the waveform quite zoomed in. So you're relying on instinct or looking to see, because if you're lucky, sometimes you get provided with the American voiceover or the native original voiceover. So you can probably guess at where they dipped, and you get an instinct for it. So to recap, often in the foreign territories, you really don't have time. It's often, once you've recorded it, it's a 1 or 2 pass mix. It's quick. For the particular broadcaster I do a lot of work for, we were presented from America with mono dialogue, stereo music and effects track. Now, I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. And then we would re-record the narration in English rather than in America, English UK rather than American. And then we would have to mix back to VT and lay back and mix on the fly and produce an undipped M&E at the same time. So you're having to dip the music and effects track underneath the sync, and you're having to dip the M&E composite of the dialogue and music and effects under the voiceover. So you've got 2 dips going. You're doing 2 things at once, and laying back to VT and checking your drop-ins are going and watching the screen and listening for all the other things like metering, worrying about loud. There's a lot going on. It's busy. It's hard.
Yeah.
So that's an unusual instance where you're given those splits, and there is just about the time to do that within the UK budget. Now, in France, Germany and Italy, often there isn't the time. So they want a composite M&E mix with no dips in it.
Yeah.
Now, should we have a look at an example of how not to do it?
Yeah, let's take a look at this project.
Okay, so in front of me I have a project it's actually from a large American studio. It's from their TV department. I have to say, I don't think it's very cleverly done, in my opinion, and they've gone about it completely the wrong way, and it was a bit of a pig to reversion in English. Let's have a look at it. So if you look at my mouse up here, what we have at the top is the voiceover track. Then we have 2 sync interview tracks, which are in brown on this particular session. And then underneath we have some sound effects, and here's the music track in blue. Now, let's have a look at the volume on here. Now, if you look at the volume of the music, and I'll zoom out a bit, you can see the key thing to look at is the top track up here.
Yeah.
The voiceover track. So every time there's a bit of voiceover, the music's kind of low. Now here's a classic bit. Let's have a look at this section here. So they've gone up with the music here, and then they dip down underneath that top voiceover track. So let's play it. So here's the music. In comes a dip for the voiceover.
Dublin, Ohio, December 14th, 2010.
Yeah. So that, as it now stands, would create a dipped M&E. So the music would be dipped under the narration.
Correct. So let's now go and have a listen to what... So we're listening to the full mix now. Now, I personally don't like monitoring through record tracks in input. It's a bad way of working with respect to delay compensation, but that's a whole nother issue. We'll come to that when we come to another session. Now, listening here, this is the full mix we're hearing.
Morning, when 30-year-old Jamie Hart pulled into the parking lot of NCO Financial.
Now, let's listen to the M&E here. Okay, I'll just move the monitoring across. So let's listen to the M&E track. So in comes the music. Ooh, big dip. Okay, I think you get the point. So,
yeah.
If the French was of a different length, the dips are all happening at the wrong time. So, if you slightly go back on their session and look at their audio groups here, across this section here, these are their audio groups where they're collecting their sources. So here's the voiceover group, the sound on tape, the natural sound, which is everything that's not an interview, sound effects, music, and reverb. Now, what they've done is using sends to bus off. So they call a mix minus, that's everything minus music. What they're doing is they're sending post-fader sends from their groups.
Yeah.
So whatever happens earlier upstream on their session, so if we go back to the source tracks, like here, where the music is dipped, is going to be reflected in the group. So all their clean stems are all going to be dipped. Now, the problem is they're dipping under the voiceover. So, as we heard, there's a piece of voiceover, there's a dip.
Down goes the music, yeah.
We don't know where the Italian voiceover is going to be. How do you know where to dip it? It shouldn't be dipped. Now, let's have a little think back about the dialogue tracks. So here, for instance, where I go, this section here, here's a piece of sync.
It was going to be who got out of the car first and could put the best shot down.
When you make an M&E mix for English-speaking territories, I'm going to want to have that music dipped under the on-screen, in-vision interview.
Yeah.
So there's a man talking, I can see him talking, he's been filmed talking about this particular event, I want the music dipped underneath him.
It was going to be who got out of the car first and could put
that's the right thing to do. So dipped under sync sound
is
good,
Yes.
dipped under voiceover or narration
Is bad.
is bad.
Or dipping there is bad. Yes. Yeah.
This is to do with international repurposing. So to make life easier for the person doing the international reversioning, because the budgets are so tight, dipping under sync sound is okay.
Yep.
Dipping under off-screen narration, voiceover, commentary, whatever you want to call it, is bad.
Bad. That is the one mantra you must take away from this. Dip under sync, good. Dip under voiceover, bad. Just to recap again, where you're dipping your music under the sync, dip it on the music faders. If you want to dip something under the voiceover, that is not the place to be doing it. Let's have a look at another session now. I'll close this one down.
So this project here, I asked Paul Maunder to see if he could ask one of his friends to provide us with a program that we could play and demonstrate. And this is an episode from a program called Truck World TV, a low-budget program for Sky Channel Showcase 2. And we must thank Rob from Big Tank Productions for giving us permission to use this program in this video. So thanks, Rob, for that. So tell us about this video.
Okay. Up the top, if we look in over here in the edit window, we have two voiceover tracks, VO Rob and VO Tim. Then we have a sync dialogue 1, sync dialogue 2, mono sound effects, stereo sound effects, and our dearly beloved music tracks 1 to 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a little play of this session, and if I bring up the desktop video, that might be handy. Right, and we'll play from here.
Oh gee, how am I going to do this? Like, so you got to scratch your heads and come up with an idea, and invariably, you know, unless it's impossible, that's what we do.
With all of the chassis components formed into shape, they are double checked against the plans, and then it's time to fire up the welders.
Well, this is where it all starts coming together now. Remember earlier we said the orders are virtually all bespoke. If you come back here next week and you'll find it's a completely different set of components. But I don't know about you, it doesn't look like a trailer to me. It's only when we get to the next stage that you say, hey, I think I know what that is.
Right, so now let's just have a little think about what we've got going on here.
So that's your voiceover,
Yeah.
and we can see on the purple track below there that we've got a dip under the VO,
Yep.
and we've also got a dip under the green clip to the right under sync. So going back to our mantra, dip under sync is good,
Yes.
but dip under VO
is bad.
What we're showing here is best practice. And I think for anybody starting out, if you get into the habit of best practice, even on a program that isn't likely to be international reversioned, getting into good habits, good practice from day one is well worth doing, because it's a lot harder to unlearn bad habits than learn good habits from day one.
90% of this is all in how you lay out your template. That's the key.
Yeah.
So we can see where he's doing his music dips on this, which is basically on the music track itself. So let's have a little look at close the video down. There we go. So we can see also, because the faders are very low. Now the problem is that the clip is relatively loud, and it's not really very good practice, if I may be brutally honest, to operate with your fader down at that kind of level as your average level, because if you look to see it's a logarithmic scale, the best place to be doing your fader rides is around here where my mouse is.
Yeah.
Not down here, because a tiny movement here is a large amount of movement in level. You have to do that to get the same thing up here, so you get much more control up here. So this really is a case of get your headroom right.
And the reason this has come about is because these almost certainly will have been CD tracks imported, which of course go all the way up to digital headroom.
Yeah.
And in broadcast work, we are living sort of 10 to 18 dB below digital headroom. So before we went into loudness, in the UK, ppm 6 is equivalent to minus 10 dBFS. So if you import CD music and you do nothing about it, the chances are your sort of native full level music, the fader is going to be around -10, -12 before you start dipping. And as you point out, you're already in the coarser area of the fader. So one of the things I tend to do nowadays with music is to go in with the clip gain and turn it down. That now brings my fader into the right sort of ballpark for easy, controllable, creative faders. So perhaps we'll just need to put that clip gain back for the moment, because of course that will completely upset the mix. But that's what I tend to do these days. So again, it's another really useful featuring with clip gain sort of that's come along, because I do a lot of work in radio and I'm forever turning down all the music tracks, because they're all come from CDs or from iTunes or whatever, and they're all coming in at pretty well close to 0 dBFS.
Okay, so moving back to the session, let's have a quick look over at the mixer and see what we've got. Here are 2 voiceover tracks. They're going off to a voiceover group. Here are dialogue tracks. They're going off to a dialogue group. So far, so good. Mono effects, they go off to an effects group. Stereo effects goes off to stereo effects group, and that's all good. Music goes off to a music group. So far, that's all good. It's all good practice so far. Now, the dialogue group, so this is the mix of this one and this one, are both routed to this dialogue audio group here. So an aux input in Pro Tools terms. That goes off to an M&E bus. Good practice. The effects do the same. So effects mono and stereo come from there, come into here, go off to the M&E. That's all good. Same with the music. Music comes in, goes off to an M&E. That's all good. But now the VO goes to the main mix, not to the M&E, because you want your M&E to be clean and voiceover. That's the definition of the M&E.
Correct.
Now, here's where, unfortunately, this desk template falls down a bit, is that here's the M&E bus, and that is double routed. So if you look here, it's going to be...
You've got a little plus sign, haven't you?
Yes. So this is the old trick of command-click when you root. So it's double routed. So if I, again, bring that up again. There we go. It's going to the M&E mix, and it's also going to the main mix. Bit of a problem. Exactly the same mix is going to the M&E mix as the main mix. So the architecture basically is wrong there. Now, let's close this session down, and we'll open it up where I've imported it into my template, and I can show you a better way of working.
Great.
Okay, so here's the same session again, which I've imported into my template, and I'll just play the opening 20 seconds or so through for you, just so you can be sure it's the same thing.
Gee, I'm going to do this, so you got to scratch your heads and come up with an idea, and invariably, you know, unless it's impossible, that's what we do.
With all of the chassis components formed into shape, they are double checked against the plans, and then it's time to fire up the welders.
Well, this is where it all starts coming together now. Remember earlier we said the orders are virtually all bespoke. You come back here next week and you'll find it's a completely different set of components. But I don't know about you, it doesn't work a trickle to me. It's only when we get to the next stage that you say, hey, I think I know what that is.
So one first thing I notice is that things are all in different places. So your VO tracks are down the bottom.
Yep.
So perhaps now it would be really good to go through and explain how and why you structure the session and your templates the way that you do.
Okay, so I'll show you quickly in the edit window. My dialogues are up here, all in red. Dialogue pink is red, flesh color kind of thing. That's my logic. Don't know why I chose green for music, but these are my music tracks. Down here, the effects tracks, and then down here in pink, which is the most alarming colour, is the voiceover, just because it's the most fleshy colour. It's the one I really need to pay attention to.
So
now,
you've chosen to colour not only the tracks, the sort of in the track titles, but also you've the clips colours, you choose to match that as well. So you've selected all your clip colours.
I do, and for me, anything which is, the one thing I liked about the Avid S6 is its use of colour. And any form of indication, I can instantly see something. Red, I know it's dialogue or sync. Green, it's music. Blue, it's effects. Pink, I use this. It's so quick. Whatever tracks I have displayed or showing, I can instantly see. And as you can see here, the track and the clip have exactly the same music. You can set that up in your preferences.
Yeah.
So let's now have a look at the mixer window. Now, the way I work is a very, very standard way. My template is very similar to a lot of people. In this particular session, there are a few other more complicated things. I'll brush over those so as not to worry anyone who would get confused by them. Okay, so here are my dialogue tracks. So we've got dialogue 1, dialogue 2, then a dialogue reverb. These all go into a VCA, so should I want to, I can control any of my dialogues.
Yeah.
And now, routing-wise, the output of all these dialogue tracks, BDX, goes to bus dialogue. Now, the reason I could put a B in front of it, so I know it's a B for bus, not a physical output. Okay, now, music does exactly the same. 2 music tracks, a music reverb, goes into a music VCA. So again, same thing. Should I want to, I can adjust the whole balance, the whole loudness, sorry, of my music group.
Yeah.
Very useful.
But of course, again, we should point out the VCAs are only available for HD users. So just in case you're thinking, I don't have VCAs, I'm afraid it's a Pro Tools HD only feature.
I'm afraid you have to put your hand in your pocket. Okay, so these go to bus music, BMX, bus music. Okay. Now, same with effects. I've got effects M01, which is mono 01, and then effects 01, which is a stereo. Okay, there are only 2 effects tracks in this particular session. All I did was if I show these, sorry, let me shut that off. There's the original session. I literally just copied it up into the correct tracks. Okay.
Yeah.
So, mono effects, stereo effects, and effects reverb. I'm using the new R2 surround from Exponential Audio. I used to use Revibe. I have it in my session. Was my go-to reverb. It's not anymore. I'm loving this for the simple reason I can do that, and it's controllable on my Slate Raven beautifully. I can just touch it, and it's just a joy. Anyway, the reason I have my voiceover tracks later is the red, the green, and the blue. So the dialogue, the music, and the effects down here are all the M&E.
Yeah.
The voiceover, the next bit, is part of the final mix. So that's why I have it last, later, lower down on my display. For that reason, it's mentally conceptualize it as a different place. So if we look at the music tracks and we look at the levels of the music tracks, so I'm fading it up under the sync here. So this is the sync, don't forget. I'm fading it up under the sync.
Yeah.
Went a little bit high. There's a gap in the music there, and I just came down and edges as the track came in. It's flat here. Now here's my voiceover. Da-da.
Yeah. But you've not dipped the music on the music track because we do not dip.
My music is high level. Also look at where the level is.
Yes.
Up there.
Indeed.
Not down here. And that's big.
Yeah.
As it is in the other session. That's because I'd corrected it with clip gain. Anyway.
Yeah.
So as we see, it plays along quite high level, and then in comes the. Let's play across this junction just so you can hear it.
So you've got to scratch your heads and come up with an idea, and invariably, unless it's impossible, that's what we do.
With all of the chassis components.
Okay, and we can see on the mix window, it's your DME fader that is dipping the music under your voiceover.
This is where it all starts coming together now.
Well, more than that, it's not just dipping the music, it's dipping everything.
Yes, so if there were effects or anything playing, it's keeping the relative balance of all those components and just dipping the lot.
So let's now go further along in my session. So we've looked at the individual elements, the dialogue, the music, the effects. Okay, fine, we're happy with that. That all makes the DME. So the dialogue, these 3 red ones here, they all go to this physical dialogue group here. It's not a VCA, it's a physical audio group, or an aux input in Pro Tools terms, but I was weaned on broadcast desks. We have physical groups. So, bus dialogue up here goes to bus M&E. Fine, we expect that to. Bus music on this channel goes to bus M&E. We expect that. Bus effects goes to bus M&E on the effects group. We expect that. Bus VO, however, goes to bus mix, not the M&E. Okay.
Yes, because we don't want a voiceover on the M&E. That's the whole point of the M&E. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all relatively sensible. Ignore all this stuff up here. This is all to do with stem printing and also being able to monitor my stems. I'll show you in a minute. But don't worry about it. It's not necessary for the understanding of this.
It's part of the way that you configure, because you're using the Slate Raven, you're using the VMon series, VMon monitoring. As you say, for the moment, that's a different issue that we'll look at presently.
Yeah, so there's my VMon. I'll show you it later. Okay, so dialogue, music, and effects are all groups, and they go into the DME, or the M&E, whatever you want to call it. I call it DME, just so it's clearer to see. Okay, now, the DME also goes into the mix. So far, that's the same as the Truck World session. However, the one bit where it differs is if you look here. So I've got bus M&E print. If you'll notice, that's pre-fader. It's a pre-fader output. So, if I'm playing along my session, I'll turn the automation off here, and I decide I want to dip the M&E under a piece of voiceover, as I'm doing now. You can see my mix levels going up and down, but my send over here stays high level.
Because it's in this
So here's a piece of voiceover,
form chassis rails are married up with the
but my M&E, because it's pre-fader, so the key here is to have a pre-fader send off your DME group, so that your DME, your M&E DME can go off and be printed pre the dips in the fade. Now you only ever dip this DME when there's a piece of voiceover. So now, if we cross over back in, and I bring up my, I'll bring it up nearer the voiceover so we can see it, and make it a little larger, and then we'll have a look at volume on here. So here we go. Playing along here, under there's a piece of red sync here. There's a piece of music. The M&E here is at full level.
Well, this is where it all starts coming together now. Remember earlier we said the orders are virtually all...
I'll spool through that. Here we go.
Hey, I think I know what that is.
So here's a piece of music and effects. You can hear I've put the effects into a jolly nice warehouse sounding reverb. Thank you, Michael Carnes. We love your reverbs. You can tell I'm like a kid in a candy shop. Anyway, so what's happening? When my voiceover comes in on the pink track down here, I'm dipping the DME. So my DME is being dipped going into the final mix. Let's play it.
And that's because it's in this part of the factory that the form chassis rails are married up with the cross members.
Okay, so that explains my routing. So the key thing is to have either a pre-fader send, I've moved it, sorry, habit, full habit. I like to keep it in a kind of mental order of dialogues, music, effects, voice, then the dip that goes into the mix.
Yeah.
That's a conceptual thing for me. By keeping everything routine, similar, it enables me to find things much faster, get an eye on how things are going wrong very quickly. Now, there are two ways. You can either use a pre-fader send like that. The reason I like using a pre-fader send is I don't want to have to confuse anyone else I pass my sessions on to, or when I step into a mix I haven't touched in a long time. And it's simple, it's clean, it goes away at full level, it gets printed, done. And I can monitor via my VMon plugin if I want to, fine. Some people choose to work in a different way, and they have two DME faders. And what they do is they have bus M&E here as its input for both of them, Now, one of them goes to bus mix, and if they were to duplicate it, so I suppose I could do that quickly and show you. So, right, let's duplicate that track. And what I would do is not have the sends on it, pre-fader. I won't remove them for now, but what they tend to do is route 1 here to the M&E and route 1 to the mix. And they call 1 the M&E dipper.
Yeah.
The one that goes to the mix. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, I could just see DME. I could hit the wrong fader. I like that way of working less. It's not so succinct and neat to me.
But as with so many things, there's more than one way to skin a cat and all the rest of it.
Yeah. So you make your choice.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's now think. Okay, what would happen in a foreign language version of this? So let's say, oh, as if by magic, here's a French version. Now,
for UK people, here's what in traditional Blue Peter fashion. Here's one we did earlier.
Indeed. So if I now mute the English voiceover, so let's do that by going. So I mute the entire track. Okay, and then go mute the entire track there. Sorry, wrong zoom. There we go. And then bring up the French. Now, as you can see, we don't know exactly where the French is going to be. If you look at the M&E dips, they're not exactly perfectly lining up. Well, because they're different to the English. Because don't forget, in a French foreign version, what are they doing? So here, for instance, so if I were to solo that track.
Une fois que tous les éléments du châssis sont en position, on vérifie par rapport au plan de construction et on se met en route pour la soudure.
Okay, so that was the voiceover. But here, what my friend Gwen is doing is translating the sync.
C'est à ce stade de la mise en œuvre que tout prend forme. Souvenez-vous que toutes les commandes sont pratiquement exécutées sur mesure.
There we go. So she's translating the envisioned sync. Okay, so let's play through. And while we're playing through, on my DME fader here, I will do the dipping. Here we go.
That's what we do.
Une fois que tous les éléments du châssis sont en position, on vérifie par rapport au plan de construction et on se met en route pour la soudure. C'est à ce stade de la mise en œuvre que tout prend forme. Souvenez-vous que toutes les commandes sont pratiquement exécutées sur mesure. Dans une semaine, l'assortiment des pièces détachées serait totalement différent. Parfois, je pense pouvoir deviner ce qui va être construit en observant les pièces, mais c'est en effet impossible à ce stade de la construction. Et c'est parce que c'est ici, dans cet atelier de l'usine, que les rails du châssis sont assemblés aux traverses qui procurent la solidité et la rigidité indispensables aux remorques. C'est aussi à ce stade-là que les supports de haute précision et les plaques de renforcement.
So those of you can see, if you look at my automation line, the dips are happening in slightly different places to the English mix.
Yeah, because the English and the French are of different duration. So that one, for instance, there was a much bigger gap between the two bits of voiceover than there were for the English. But of course, it's just one fader, and the French version is now mixed.
Bon, je préfère être prudent, mais on est à la dernière étape de soudure. Les parties principales du châssis et l'articulation sont assemblées et la...
Okay, so that makes, I think, clearly the point that to be able to reversion, to be able to revoice, whether you're doing a different language or not, is very quick, providing you've made a good M&E mix in the first place. So the key is to not approach the full mix the M&E first, and then you go through, and if your M&E is brilliant, all you need to do is scroll through, find where there's voiceover, and dip the M&E under the voiceover. You don't need to play through the entire mix until it's time to print. It's that simple. So the trick is to set up your template correctly. I'll just put mine back to how I like it. There you go. It makes the OCD in me feel much happier. And that's it. Now, the reason... There's one slight further issue in that Historically, people have always asked for an undipped music track, meaning undipped under the sync. Now, the reason people used to ask for this was in the old days, back in the days of multi-track, it was very difficult for production when they gave you pieces of music or things you were suggesting in the dub. You would say, oh, what about this marvellous Pink Floyd album? And you'd record a bit in and say, well, doesn't that bit with money work fantastically and be overused? That used to happen. And then the production would say, well, I need that bit of music for a promo, or I want to make a promo where I want the sync and the effects, but I can't use that music. It's not clearable on this particular channel, and they want to be able to remove it. Now, they would often ask for a mix of the music. So as you can see here, the music crossfades. You'll see I've crossfaded the musics and I've dipped them under the sync as well, because I believe that's what should be in a DME. Now, in the old days, people used to ask for a mix of the music, but not dipped under the sync, because they wanted to extract the music out for use in a promo. So they wanted to be able to get their hands on the bit of music you'd used, but they didn't want it dipped. So the productions in the old days didn't have access to the multi-track you were using, or your mag dubbers if you were working in a film suite. And, you know, when I grew up, the AMS audiophile was just about coming online and was a green screen NatWest cache point lookalike. And we'd fly in our music tracks into that, sync them up, do what we wanted with them. And then they would want this mix of music coming out. Now, seeing as we've now come into the age of Pro Tools, where it's so easy for me to be able to click on a region and say, right, I want to consolidate that piece of music there. You want that piece of music? Well, we can consolidate that. We can
export selected as files.
Yeah, and export selected as files, and off we go.
And out it goes. Or it may well be that, you know, obviously that was an edited version. They may just want the original track as is, and that's just a matter of pulling it out of your audio clips and off it goes. So that, yes, there is no longer the need to provide trails or promotions with
an undipped music stem,
an undipped music element, so they can use those in their trail packages. They can just pull the files straight out of the project, and hey presto. So that has at least made that slight. So there isn't the need now for undipped music stems, undipped effect stems, because that is no longer a requirement. We need those elements dipped. It's just the when we're doing the M&E or DM&E, that's the situation where we dip under sync, we don't dip under voiceover or commentary.
Yep. So if you want to have a little think about stems and all that sort of thing, maybe that's a topic for another time. But for instance, within my template, from here, these are my record masters, and then here are the actual tracks. Now you can see I don't put my tracks into input to be able to monitor them. I use this VMon plugin. I can actually listen to the stems, or I can listen to the sends. I can record my dialogue, my music, my effects, my voiceover, my DME undipped. So music and effects are dipped under dialogue, but the VO is undipped because it's just the VO. The DME is undipped, because the idea being for stems is that stems like dialogue, music and effects, you should be able to put those three faders up together. So you should be able to put these three faders here together to be able to reconstitute the DME.
Yeah.
It should contain all the correct reverbs. That's why I had a separate reverb for dialogue, a separate reverb for music, a separate reverb for effects. So each stem has its own reverb, its own space, its own reverb, so that when you print your stems, I don't need to do multiple passes and be turning tracks off because they're all going to the same reverb. So the key to all of this is setting up your template correctly.
Yeah, because of course you're not having to do more. When you do your final layoff, you're not just doing the layoff, the bounce for the full mix. Because you configured the template the way you have, you're going to create all your print tracks in one pass.
Correct.
So you can do your dialogue stem, your music stem, your effect stem, your VO stem your DME mix and the full mix all in one pass, so you're not having to go back and do another one and do another one and do another one.
Correct. So I can either print the entire track, which for me, I think I'm happy to produce separate stem elements by using offline bounce in Pro Tools 11, but the full mix, I always want to hear, because that's the one that's going out onto air. I want to listen to it. I want to check. So I make sure delay compensation's on. Because I'm not monitoring through these record tracks, they're going to be perfectly in sync, and delay compensation will work perfectly for me. So I can literally go to the start of the project, hit record, bang, they're done. Now, if I'm working in 5.1, don't forget I might have a 5.1 dialogue and a stereo dialogue as well. So I can end up with 54 tracks for a documentary in 5.1 in record at once. So that's 5.1 dialogue, 5.1 music, 5.1 effects, 5.1 voice, 5.1 dialogue, blah, blah, and so on. And then a stereo version of each. Count it all up, it's about 54 tracks. It's a lot of tracks. But hey, it's all set up, it all works, and it's all there. So that's really the key to it all, is setting your template up correctly.
So it's been an eye-opener for me, not least to actually see how somebody else works. It's been really great to actually work out and to establish the protocols and the whys and the wherefores for undipped versus dipped when you dip. So in essence, in conclusion, the mantra is you dip under sync sound, but for the M&E mix or DM&E mix, but you do not dip under voiceover. And the other real key thing is produce your international mix first, so that's everything except the UK voiceover or the native language voiceover. Produce that mix first, and then effectively you're doing an international reversion for your native language, so that gets you your full mix, and then you've got all the necessary constituent parts to be able to hand on to the production company so that the person doing the Chinese reversioning can do it very, very simply.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you very, very much for taking the time to not only spend with us today, but also in all the preparation work that you've done to show us all of this. Much appreciated. And we'll all see you again soon.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.